The wire transfer hit my account at 4:47 p.m. on a Friday. $8,400,000. Not bad for a guy they called obsolete 3 weeks earlier. Let me back up and tell you how a 48-year-old sales director just took down an entire executive team with a contract clause they never bothered to read. It started with Trevor Bradshaw leaning against my office doorframe like he owned the building. New VP, maybe 40, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's cars. The kind of guy who probably has his assistant schedule his bathroom breaks. Kit, he says. Not Catherine, not Ms. Reynolds, just Kit. Like we're drinking buddies. Your relationship-heavy approach worked great 20 years ago. But we're scaling to AI-driven solutions now. More efficient. I've been in corporate sales long enough to speak fluent bullshit. Translation: you're old, your methods are old, and we're replacing you with software. Here's what Trevor didn't know about me. I spent 6 years in the Marines before getting into sales. You learn 2 things in the military: how to follow orders and how to plan for when the orders don't make sense. 20 years in corporate America taught me a third thing: always have an exit strategy. I understand, I told him. Because arguing with guys like Trevor is like wrestling with pigs. You both get dirty, but the pig enjoys it. 20 minutes later, I'm in HR with Linda Kowalski sliding severance papers across her desk. My badge gets deactivated before I finish signing. They hand me a company laptop bag. Logo right on front. Like corporate swag makes up for flushing 20 years of relationships down the drain. Walking past my desk for the last time, I grab my client binder. Beat-up thing that survived 3 recessions and more airport security lines than I want to count. Inside are 20 years of relationship maps, golf scorecards, and handwritten notes from client dinners. The kind of stuff you can't put in Salesforce. Trevor thinks that's all inefficient. Good luck replacing a bourbon tasting with a chatbot. Here's what he missed during his brilliant modernization speech. 3 of my biggest accounts, Phoenix Industries, Titan Logistics, and Summit Healthcare, have key person clauses written into their contracts. My name in black ink. No Kit Reynolds, no deal. Simple math. I mentioned this during the termination meeting. Trevor just nodded like I was talking about the weather. In his head, he's probably thinking, A, I can handle a CFO whose daughter's wedding you attended. Right. Let me know how that works out. On my computer monitor was a yellow sticky note I'd put there 3 years ago. Check section 12C. I wrote that after a different executive tried to steal credit for a deal I'd closed. Spent 6 months fighting for contract language that would protect me if this ever happened again. Looking at that note, I knew this was about to get interesting. See, most people think getting fired is the end of the story. Really? It's just the opening move in a chess game most executives don't even know they're playing. I didn't argue with Trevor or beg for my job back. Guys like him think winning means talking the loudest. My kind of winning is quieter. You calculate, you wait, and you execute when the time is right. The security guard gave me that look. You know the one. Half sympathy, half relief it's not him getting walked out. I nodded back and headed for the parking garage. In my car, I pulled out my phone and started making a list. First, dust off the tactical relationship protocol documentation. Second, pull revenue numbers for the last 3 years. Third, make sure every file I need is backed up in the right places. Bottom line, when someone calls you obsolete, they better make sure they actually own what you built. 2 days later, my buddy Tom Schultz calls me. Still works there, keeps his ear to the ground. You want to know how they're handling your accounts? He asks. Let me guess. Mass email and a webinar? Bingo. Trevor sent out some corporate speak about seamless transitions and enhanced digital experiences. No personal calls, no face-to-face meetings. Just PowerPoint slides. I had to laugh. 20 years building relationships and they think a PDF is going to hold it together. How long before the first one walks? I asked. Phoenix already sent a termination notice, Tom says. Came in this morning. Very polite, very formal, very final. That account took me 8 years to build. Flew to their headquarters during a blizzard to close the first deal. Spent Thanksgiving dinner with their CEO when his wife was in the hospital. You don't replace that with a webinar. What did the notice say? Section 14.2, termination for convenience due to key person change. Effective immediately. I smiled. When you've been in this game long enough, you can hear lawyers writing that kind of language. It's not emotional. It's business. And business just cost Trevor about $4 million in annual revenue. How's leadership taking it? Panic mode. Trevor's calling emergency meetings. Rick Pemberton's asking why nobody saw this coming. Here's the thing about panic. It makes people sloppy. They start making phone calls they shouldn't make and sending emails they shouldn't send. More importantly, they start using things they don't own. That night, I baked a bourbon peach pie. my grandmother's recipe. When it came out of the oven, I wrote cost of doing business in whipped cream across the top and took a picture. Almost sent it to Trevor, but sometimes the best jokes are the ones you keep to yourself. Then I sat down with my employment contract and read Section 12C for the first time in 3 years. Every word, every comma, every clause I'd fought for. It was beautiful. See, those key person riders in my client contracts weren't some company freebie. I negotiated every single one myself, sometimes dragging legal into calls they hated, sometimes waiting out procurement until they gave in. Why? Because I learned something the hard way. Companies don't like being handcuffed to individual employees. But my clients insisted on it. They knew they weren't just buying software licenses. They were buying Kit Reynolds. I keep renewal dates on a wall calendar in my home office, red circles around the important ones. Looking at it now, I could see exactly what was coming. Titan Logistics, 9 days. Summit Healthcare, 15 days. The clock was already ticking, and I didn't need to do anything except wait. My phone rang 3 days later. Unknown number, but the voice was familiar. Kit, just wanted to check in. How are you doing? Phoenix Industries procurement director. Warm, friendly, fishing to see if I was available for new business. I'm doing well, thanks for asking. Good, good. Listen, if you land somewhere new, give us a call. We'd love to continue working together. I smiled into the phone. The bleeding had started, and the best part was, I hadn't even begun to squeeze yet. 9 days after Phoenix walked, Titan Logistics sent their goodbye letter. Same formal language. Pursuant to Section 11B, terminating effective immediately due to key person change. No emotion, no negotiation, no second chances. That account had been mine since their first contract. I'd gotten their CFO to renew during the 2009 crash by personally delivering a case of bourbon, the same stuff he served at his wedding 20 years earlier. Cost me 3 mortgage payments for that bottle of Pappy Van Winkle, but it was worth every penny. Now gone with a mouse click. Tom called me that afternoon. Dude, it's chaos here. Trevor's running around like his hair's on fire. Rick Pemberton locked himself in his office for 3 hours. What's the damage? Titan was worth $7 million annually. Combined with Phoenix, that's $11 million in revenue walking out the door in 2 weeks. I was quiet for a minute doing the math. How's Trevor explaining this to the board? He's calling it expected transition churn and says they'll replace the revenue with their new AI platform. Right. Replace 20-year relationships with chatbots. Good luck with that strategy. Here's the funny part, Tom continues. Legal wants to see your old employment contract. Howard Brennan's been asking questions about some clause you negotiated. Now we're getting somewhere? They ask you about it? Nope. But word is, they're trying to figure out if they can compel you to come back and save the accounts. I had to laugh. Let me know how that works out for them. That night I pulled out my contract files. Not just the employment agreement, but every licensing deal I'd negotiated over the years. See, the tactical relationship protocol I'd developed wasn't company property. Every year, I licensed it to them for 12 months at a negotiated rate. The license expired the day they walked me out. Every time they used my methodology after that was copyright infringement. And according to Tom, they were still using my scripts for client calls. Amateur hour. 4 days later, Summit Healthcare didn't even wait for their renewal date. Their termination notice hit legal's inbox at 11:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. I know because Tom sent me a screenshot. Same language as the others. Key person change, terminating for convenience. That was the biggest one. Summit took me 9 years to close. Their original CEO was old school. Wouldn't sign anything until we'd played 18 holes and shared a bottle of scotch. I'd flown to Scotland with him to tour distilleries when they were considering our enterprise package. Trevor probably thinks you can replace that with a Zoom call. What's the total damage now? I asked Tom. 18 million in annual revenue. Gone in 3 weeks. That's when the real comedy started. My phone rang the next morning. Rick Pemberton's assistant, woman who'd never spoken to me directly in 20 years, calling with the subject line, "Need your TRP scripts ASAP." No pleasantries, no explanation, just an assumption that I'd drop everything and hand over what I'd built. I let it go to voicemail. Then Rick himself called. I picked up on the 4th ring. "Kit, we need to talk. Legal says you have some kind of licensing arrangement for your methodology." "That's correct. We need those scripts back. Our teams are struggling with client retention without them." "I understand your situation, Rick, but the license expired when you terminated me. Using my materials without a current agreement is copyright infringement." Silence on the other end. You could hear the wheels turning. "What would it take to renew the license?" "We'd need to discuss terms. But first, you should know I've documented every unauthorized use since my termination date. I have server logs showing exactly when your people accessed my files. More silence. Longer this time. I think we should meet. Can you come in tomorrow? I'll need legal counsel present. Of course, Howard Brennan will be there. After I hung up, I sat back and smiled. They were finally starting to understand the position they'd put themselves in. That evening, I called my lawyer, guy I'd used for contract negotiations before, explained the situation. Kit, this is either brilliant or career suicide. Please tell me you documented everything. Every email, every access log, every licensing agreement for the past 10 years. Plus, I've got board meeting minutes where they specifically called my methodology proprietary third-party content. Jesus, they actually put that in writing? 3 years ago, when they were trying to get budget approval for my licensing fees. He was quiet for a minute. What's your end game here? Honestly, I just want them to honor the contracts they signed. They terminated me without cause, tried to steal my intellectual property, and assumed I'd just go away quietly. What's the buyout provision in your employment agreement? Section 12C. If they terminate without cause and then try to compel performance, they owe me 5 times the trailing 12-month revenue from my originating accounts. More silence. Then, how much revenue are we talking about? About 18 million annually. So roughly 45 million buyout. Kit, that's not a severance package. That's a small company acquisition. I know, and they triggered this themselves? They terminated me, lost the accounts, then demanded I come back and fix it. Textbook case. I'll be there tomorrow. This should be interesting. That night I couldn't sleep, so I went through my files one more time. Every contract, every email, every performance review. I'd been methodical about documentation, old military habit. The employment agreement was clean. Section 12C was clear as day. The licensing deals were all properly executed. The access logs showed continued use after termination. They'd walked into their own trap. My phone buzzed around midnight. Text from an unknown number. Kit, this is Sarah from Phoenix Industries. Heard you might be available for consulting work. Call me when you can. Then another one 20 minutes later. Different number, Kit Reynolds. This is Mike at Titan. We should talk. Word was getting around. The clients weren't just walking away from Meridian. They were looking for me. I set my phone aside and went to bed. Tomorrow was going to be a long day, but I had a feeling it would be worth it. The meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. I planned to be there at 1:55, not a minute earlier. In the Marines, we called this tactical punctuality. Show up exactly when expected, not when convenient. I laid out my clothes the night before. Navy suit, white shirt, no jewelry except my wedding ring. Professional but not overdressed. I wanted to look like someone who belonged in that boardroom, not someone begging for their job back. Because I wasn't begging. I was collecting. I walked into that boardroom at exactly 1:55 p.m. carrying 2 things. A leather portfolio with my employment contracts and a manila folder marked TRP licensing, complete documentation. The temperature felt like they'd cranked the AC to Arctic. Rick Pemberton was already positioned at the head of the table, coffee in a paper cup instead of his usual steel mug. Small detail, but it told me he was rattled. Trevor sat to his right, still trying to look confident but missing that trademark smirk. Linda Kowalski from HR shuffled papers she didn't need to shuffle. And Howard Brennan, their general counsel, had the look of a man who'd spent the last 24 hours reading contracts he wished he'd never signed. My lawyer, Dave Martinez, took the seat beside me. Former military guy like me understands the value of preparation and keeping your mouth shut until it's time to talk. Rick opened with typical executive bluster. Kit, we appreciate you coming in. We think there's been some misunderstanding about the transition process and your ongoing obligations. Happy to clarify, I said. Nothing more. Per your employment agreement, you have certain non-compete restrictions that prevent you from working with former clients. I unzipped my portfolio and slid copies of my contract across the table. One to Rick, one to Howard, one to Linda. Let's read it together, I said. Simple, direct. I pulled out yellow sticky notes and flagged 2 sections. Section 12C, termination provisions, and Exhibit D, employee-originated accounts. Howard adjusted his glasses and started reading. At first, his eyes moved fast, like someone skimming something they think they already know. Then his pen stopped tapping. His lips started moving like he was reading the same line twice. He looked at Exhibit D, back to Section 12C, then up at me with an expression that wasn't neutral anymore. I want everyone to understand what Section 12C says, I began. It was negotiated after previous leadership tried to reassign my accounts without acknowledgement. It covers what happens when the company terminates without cause and then tries to compel continued service. I tapped Exhibit D. This identifies which accounts are employee-originated. Same accounts you've been trying to retain for the past 3 weeks. Rick leaned back like putting distance between himself and the paper would change what was written on it. Howard kept reading, slower now, like every word had weight. Then Howard did something that told me everything I needed to know. He flattened his palm over Section 12C like he was trying to hold the words in place. His voice was careful when he read aloud. Upon termination without cause, 1. Non-compete provisions dissolve with respect to employee-originated accounts. 2. Any attempt to compel service triggers mandatory buyout equal to 2. 5 times trailing 12-month revenue from said accounts. 3. Continued use of TRP materials without license constitutes willful infringement. He stopped reading, adjusted his glasses. Read it again silently. I watched the realization hit him. Not the vindictive kind of satisfaction, just professional confirmation that the contract worked exactly like I'd written it. Trevor finally spoke up, voice too loud, "This is ridiculous. The TRP methodology is company property. You developed it here, we own it." Howard didn't even look at him. Just flipped to Exhibit D and read, "TRP proprietary methodology licensed annually by mutual agreement. Ownership remains with employee-originated account holder." He set the page down, looked directly at Trevor and said, "It's not ours." That's when I opened my manila folder and pulled out 3 years of licensing agreements. Each one clearly marked employee-originated methodology, licensed, not assigned. "I've licensed my methodology to the company every year since 2021, I said. "The license expired when you terminated me. Every use since then is copyright infringement." From my folder came the access logs. Server timestamps showing exactly when their people had logged into shared drives where my templates lived. I set up security alerts for post-termination access. Here's your usage history. Dates, times, user IDs. Howard took the logs, scanned them, and set them down like they might catch fire. Linda finally spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "We did use her scripts last week." Everyone looked at me. I didn't gloat, didn't smile, just waited for them to finish connecting the dots. Rick tried one more angle. What would it take to make this situation go away? I reached into my portfolio and pulled out 2 sealed envelopes, slid them across the table side by side. "Option A," I said, tapping the first envelope. "You retain me as an independent consultant at $2,000 per hour, 200-hour minimum, paid in advance. Trevor resigns. You issue a public statement acknowledging the misclassification and reinstate my TRP license at triple the previous rate." I tapped the second envelope. "Option B, I decline your offer and join Apex Partners. Phoenix, Titan, and Summit have already signed new agreements with them. You wire the Section 12C buyout plus infringement damages by Friday at 5 p.m. My tone didn't change. This wasn't anger, it was business math with consequences. Trevor started to say something about extortion, but Howard cut him off. "How much are we talking about for the buyout?" I pulled out a calculator and did the math in front of them. 18 million in trailing 12-month revenue times 2. 5 equals 45 million. Plus documented infringement damages and legal fees. The CFO, who'd been silent until now, went pale. You could see him calculating how many quarterly earnings that represented. "The accounts are already gone," I continued. "Phoenix, Titan, and Summit terminated for key person change. That's their right under their contracts. Apex Partners has been in touch. They're interested in bringing me on as a senior partner." I let that sink in for a minute. Here's what you need to understand. I didn't negotiate Section 12C because I wanted to hurt the company. I negotiated it because I'd been burned before. Some VP tried to steal my accounts and give them to his buddy. The only thing that stopped him was me refusing to sign my contract renewal without protection. Rick rubbed his temples. "This was never about the money." "You're right, it was about respect. Recognition that my accounts weren't just company assets, they were relationships I'd built over 20 years. Phoenix's CEO came to my daughter's wedding. Titan's CFO and I hunt together every fall. You can't replace that with AI. Howard was reading through the access logs again. "How much documentation do you have of post-termination usage?" I pulled out a thick folder. Every login, every file download, every email that used my templates. Plus board meeting minutes from 3 years ago where leadership specifically identified TRP as third-party licensed methodology. "Jesus," he muttered. "Your people have been good about documenting things," I said. "Very thorough record-keeping." Dave leaned over and whispered something in my ear. I nodded. "My counsel advises that we've covered the key points. You have 2 options on the table. The decision is yours, but I need an answer by close of business Friday." I started packing up my papers. "One last thing. Apex Partners made me an offer yesterday. Senior partner, equity stake, and they're covering all legal fees for this situation. Phoenix, Titan, and Summit are excited to continue our relationship. I stood up, Dave beside me. The envelopes contained the complete terms. Read them carefully. Both options are legally binding once you open them. I headed for the door, then turned back. Oh, and Trevor? That AI platform you're so excited about? Good luck explaining to the board why it cost you $45 million in buyouts to implement. The door closed behind us with a quiet click. Friday afternoon, 3:47 p.m. I was in my home office when the bank alert hit my phone. Incoming wire transfer, $8,400,000. I stared at the number for a full minute. $8.4 million. Not bad for 3 weeks' work. Dave called 10 minutes later. They went with option B, full buyout plus damages. Wire transfers should hit your account any minute now. Already did. How do you feel? Like justice tastes expensive. Here's what happened after we left that boardroom on Tuesday. According to Tom, who's been my inside source this whole time, the place went into full meltdown mode. Howard spent Wednesday morning calculating exact damage numbers. $45 million for the Section 12C buyout. Another $2.8 million in documented infringement damages, plus legal fees that were already climbing towards 7 figures. Trevor tried one last play Thursday morning, called an emergency board meeting, pitched some bullshit about fighting the contract in court. It's unconscionable, he said. No reasonable company would agree to those terms. Howard shut that down fast. We did agree to those terms. I have Rick's signature on every page. Kit Reynolds' lawyer sent over the board meeting minutes where we specifically discussed the unusual nature of Section 12C and approved it anyway. Turns out 3 years ago, when they were trying to budget for my licensing fees, some genius put it in writing that my terms were unprecedented but necessary given the critical nature of the employee-originated accounts. Their own words, in their own minutes, signed by their own board. Trevor's next brilliant idea was claiming I'd somehow forced them to sign under duress. Howard read him Section 12C again, slower this time, pointing out the part where it says, negotiated at employee's request following attempted account reassignment by previous management. Translation: I didn't trick them into anything. I told them exactly why I needed the protection. And they agreed because they knew I was right. The board vote wasn't even close. Option B, unanimous. Cut the check, wire the money, make it go away before it got worse. Rick Pemberton cleaned out his office Thursday evening. Word is, the board accepted his resignation about 30 seconds after they signed off on my buyout. Trevor got walked out Friday morning, security escort and everything. Linda Kowalski's running the company now, at least until they find permanent replacements. First thing she did was issue a company-wide memo about respecting institutional knowledge and the value of long-term relationships. Too little, too late, but I appreciate the sentiment. Tom called me Saturday morning with the final numbers. You want to know how much damage you actually did? Lay it on me. $18 million in lost annual revenue from the 3 accounts. $8.4 million buyout. $2.8 million in damages. Legal fees pushing toward $1 million. Plus, they're now paying consulting fees to Apex Partners to help transition the remaining accounts. Jesus, gets better. The board's launching an investigation into management practices that led to the loss of critical business relationships. They hired an outside firm to review every major account and identify potential key person dependencies. How many do they find? 12 accounts with similar exposure. Total annual revenue about $40 million. They're scrambling to negotiate protective clauses with those account managers before someone else gets ideas. I had to laugh. Sounds like job security for the people who are left. Kit, you didn't just get your money. You changed how they think about talent retention. Every senior account manager in the company is suddenly untouchable. That afternoon, I drove over to Apex Partners for my first day as senior partner. Corner office, equity stake, and a signing bonus that made the buyout look like lunch money. My assistant, yes, I have an assistant now, handed me 3 messages. Phoenix Industries wanting to schedule a strategy session. Titan Logistics asking about expanding our relationship. Summit Healthcare's CEO inviting me to his annual golf tournament in Scotland. Business as usual. Here's the thing about revenge. Most people think it's about getting even. Really, it's about getting what you're worth. For 20 years, I built relationships, closed deals, and made other people rich. I was good at it. Better than good, I was irreplaceable. But irreplaceable only matters if people respect what you've built. Trevor called me obsolete because he couldn't see the difference between technology and relationships. Rick backed him up because he was too lazy to read the contracts he was signing. They both assumed I'd just go away quietly. Bad assumption. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Kit, this is Trevor. Can we talk? I deleted it without responding. We'd already talked. In a boardroom. With lawyers present. He said everything he needed to say when he called my life's work inefficient. But here's what I want you to understand. I didn't write Section 12C because I'm vindictive. I wrote it because I'd learned the hard way that companies will screw you if you let them. That young VP who tried to steal my accounts back in 2021, he taught me that trust without contracts is just wishful thinking. So I protected myself. I documented everything. I made sure my value was written down in black ink with signatures and dates. And when they tried to throw me away, I made sure it cost them exactly what they'd agreed it would cost. The wire transfer was just math. Consequences they'd signed up for when they underestimated what I was worth. Monday morning, I'm meeting with a potential new client. Manufacturing company out of Detroit looking for someone to handle their West Coast expansion. They specifically asked for Kit Reynolds. Apparently word gets around in certain circles about people who know how to protect their clients' interests. The meeting's at 9 a.m. I'll be there at 8:55, not a minute earlier or later. Professional punctuality. I'm wearing my navy suit, white shirt, wedding ring. Same uniform I wore to that boardroom 3 weeks ago. But this time I'm not there to collect on a contract. I'm there to write a new one. And you can bet your ass it's going to have a Section 12C.